The sharp, hollow clink of a shovel hitting sun-baked earth at 7:15 a.m. is the sound of a biological foreclosure. I have stood in my own backyard on a Saturday morning, coffee cooling in my hand, staring at a raised bed that felt less like a garden and more like a forensic crime scene. I had nursed a tomato plant from a tiny hopeful seed, fed it the expensive $16 organic blend from the garden center, and even talked to it when I thought the neighbors weren't looking. And yet, by late July, it sat there yellowed and brittle, as if it had given up on me personally. I have tracked this specific frustration across hundreds of growers: the wilted peppers, the leggy basil, the $52 bags of premium potting mix ripped open with the desperate hope that this season would be the one when you realize you have spent more money trying to grow a single salad than it would cost to buy a month's worth of organic produce at the store. A quiet voice in your head begins to whisper a toxic lie: you are just not good enough at this. In my research into the industrialization of the home garden, I discovered a subject, a regular backyard grower, who spent 14 years doing everything the manuals and the YouTube experts commanded. He had a thermometer in his compost pile, turning it every 3 days like a religious ritual. Then, while digging a hole to plant a fig tree, he hit a biological anomaly. Roughly 21 inches below a pile of wood chips he had dumped and completely forgotten about nearly 3 years earlier, the earth was jet black. It wasn't tea brown. It wasn't tea clay. Gray, it was a deep saturated obsidian. This was soil that hadn't been turned, measured, or monitored. It had been left in the dark to do exactly what it was designed to do. We have to ask who benefits from you remaining ignorant of that black earth. In the United States alone, the composting industry is a juggernaut that moves over $500 million a year. This is a sprawling ecosystem of bins, tumblers, activators, thermometers, and an endless stream of replacement parts that keep you tethered to the garden center every spring. And behind that retail front sits a fertilizer supply chain built on an even darker structural dependence. When you rip open a bag of synthetic nitrogen and scatter it across your bed, the leaves green up within 48 hours. It looks like health, and it feels like progress, but in my laboratory logs, I record this as a biological assault. Those nitrogen salts hit the soil solution, like bleach hitting a petri dish. The bacterial colonies that were quietly mineralizing nutrients for free are obliterated. The fungal threads, the mycorrhizal networks that were physically wiring your plants into a living supply chain are severed. You are paying $16 to destroy the only workforce willing to work for nothing. This is not an accident. It is the business model. A fertilizer company does not want your soil to be healthy. It wants your soil to be on life support. The moment your soil begins to feed itself, you vanish from their revenue sheet. Synthetic nitrogen is engineered to bypass the microbial exchange entirely. The plant receives a hit of soluble nutrients, but the ancient deal is broken, where roots exude sugars to pay fungi for phosphorus and trace minerals. After a few seasons of this chemical intervention, a teaspoon of your ground, which should contain billions of organisms and miles of mycelium, becomes little more than sterile construction sand. Then, the industry sells you the cure for the problem they created. They tell you the soil looks tired. They suggest $52 bags of so-called living soil or amendments. You add them, and following the instructions on the back, you till them in thoroughly. I've analyzed the physics of this move. Every pass of the tiller is a seismic event in a microbial city. You are shredding the architecture that took months to rebuild, and exposing anaerobic layers to oxygen, which causes stored carbon to flash burn into the atmosphere instead of nourishing the roots. Herbicides like glyphosate often finish the job. My review of published research confirms that these chemicals chelate micronutrients and suppress the very fungi that facilitate the closed loop of life. I've spent considerable time examining a 2013 study published in Soil Biology and Biochemistry. The data was staggering. Organic matter broken down directly inside the soil held onto 40% more nitrogen than the same material composted in a bin and applied later. That 40% isn't just a number. It's the difference between a plant that possesses sovereignty and a plant that is an addict waiting for your next trip to the store. The question we must sit with is simple. If the earth already runs a nutrient delivery system, more efficient than anything a factory can bottle, why were we convinced it was broken in the first place? Think about the umwelt, the sensory world of the soil. Underneath every handful of healthy earth is a civilization that has been refining its logistics for 450 million years. Fungi send out hair-thin hyphae that stretch dozens of feet, linking root systems into a living wire grid. I've observed data showing that a tomato plant under stress can broadcast chemical signals through this grid, prompting a bean plant several feet away to shift its own nutrient allocation toward the point of connection. This system has survived every ice age and extinction event on one condition: that it remains undisturbed. The numbers from the Rodale Institute provide the cold proof. They tracked organic plots against synthetic ones for over 30 years. In peak conditions, the yields were comparable, but in drought years, the organic plots, built on undisturbed soil biology, outperformed the synthetic plots by 30%. Healthy soil laced with decomposing organic matter holds roughly 20% more water per cubic foot. This isn't just wet dirt, it is a sophisticated water management system held together by microbial biofilms and fungal channels. It is infrastructure that took years of quiet accumulation to build, yet we are taught to destroy it every time we fire up a rototiller. There is a carbon angle here that the fertilizer industry carefully avoids. An above-ground compost pile is an aerobic furnace. It breathes carbon dioxide into the air as it breaks down. But when you bury organic matter directly, you are practicing a form of carbon sequestration that feeds the soil from the inside out. My research has led me to a conclusion that sounds almost too simple to be true. You do not need the bin, the tumbler, or the ratio chart. You need a shovel and whatever is currently sitting in your kitchen trash. I have begun testing a protocol I call the direct burial. You dig a trench where you intend to grow food, about 15 inches deep and a shovel, blade wide. You take your banana peels, your coffee grounds, your eggshells, and the soggy lettuce from the back of the fridge. You add torn strips of cardboard. You fill that trench 2/3 of the way, push the dirt back over the top, and you literally walk away. Go inside, forget it exists for 8 weeks. What happens during those 8 weeks is what made me feel like a fool for every dollar I ever spent on bagged amendments. Beneath that quiet mound, billions of organisms are clocking in. Fungi thread white filaments through the coffee grounds. Bacteria dissolve eggshell calcium into a form a tomato root can actually drink. Earthworms pull cardboard deeper, opening air channels no machine could replicate. You didn't manage them. You didn't measure the temperature. You simply buried your waste and got out of the way. By week 10, that trench is a vein of dark, spongy, fungally rich soil sitting exactly where the roots are reaching. It feeds upward through capillary action every time it rains. In my raised bed studies, I've found that you don't even need the trench. You can dig a single pit in the center of the bed, about 21 inches deep. You treat it as a subterranean feeding station, capping it with soil once it's nearly full. It radiates nutrients outward into every root zone in the bed. You are creating a self-fertilizing system for $0. If you rotate these pits over 4 years, every square foot of your garden becomes part of the oldest composting system on the planet. The part that breaks the modern brain is that soil does not operate on our logic of productivity or hustle. Soil operates on stillness. The less you interfere, the faster the ancient operating system switches on. I've noticed that people who succeed at this are those who have made peace with being invisible managers of a wild workforce. But as you begin to invite this biology back into your yard, you must remain a vigilant researcher yourself. Not every arrival is a beneficial one. In my field logs, I've noted the spread of an invader, the jumping worm genus Amynthas. If you pick up a normal earthworm, it moves with a calm, deliberate rhythm. A jumping worm thrashes like a frantic snake. Look at the clitellum, the band around its body. On a beneficial builder, it is raised and pinkish. On a jumping worm, it is flush with the skin, smooth as plastic, and a pale, milky white. These are not builders. They are strippers who devour the protective leaf litter so fast, the ground turns into loose coffee grounds that can't hold water. If you see them, do not toss them in the compost. Contain them. Your goal is to protect the quiet engineers, the tunnel builders who turn death into fertility. I want you to visualize a morning that none of us want to imagine, but all of us have glimpsed in the corners of our minds. You see the grocery store shelves stripped bare. You see the parking lot full of people who drove 40 minutes for the last flat of wilted lettuce priced at $5 per each. You can feel the tension in the air, that specific electricity that hums through a crowd, when a just-in-time supply chain reaches its breaking point. Now, I want you to see yourself walking out your back door on that same morning. The kale is still standing. The garlic is pushing through the mulch. There are potatoes sleeping under a mound of wood chips you dropped there 7 months ago and never touched again. You pull a few, brush off the dark crumble of living soil, and carry them into your kitchen without a receipt, without a checkout line, and without any dependency on a refrigerated truck. That contrast is not a metaphor. It is the clearest picture I can give you of what is actually at stake when we talk about soil health. Everything I've researched, the microbial networks, the fungal trade, the 2013 soil biology street, Uddies is really about gardening technique. It is about sovereignty. It is about who gets to eat when the normal way of getting food quietly stops working. The system that sells you synthetic nitrogen is the same system that needs you to fail, just enough to keep you coming back next season. Your dependency is their harvest. The moment you learn to build fertility from decay and moisture, you become invisible to that machine. You step outside the transaction entirely. That terrifies an industry built on the assumption that soil is dead unless they sell you the cure. But the earth has not forgotten how to feed you. It has simply been waiting for you to stop interrupting. So, I'm curious about the data in your own backyard. In my ongoing study of these closed loops, I want to know, what is the first thing you are going to bury this week? Is it the vegetable trimmings from last night? Or the coffee filter sitting in your machine right now? Drop it in the comments. Every answer is another person opting out of the panic aisle for good.